These are basically, they are remnants of ancient jungles and rainforests from about 50 to 60 million years ago. They are what they call carbon-based redox molecules. And what they do, they set up housekeeping in your intestine. And they're very friendly and they survive very well. Some people, especially if they have what we call SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, many of these folks, when they take probiotics, or they take fermented foods, they produce enough gas to fill the Goodyear blimp. I mean, they just feel miserable. Really help heal that gut.
Preventative medicine.
That's exactly right. That's the best form.
You have to be a student for the rest of your life. And that's one of the reasons that I think we get along so well is we hold, maybe not each other, right, but ourselves, of course, accountable for continuing to read and study information and figure out why and how to affect these, greater, mechanisms in the body and these physiological interactions. If you are listening to this, that means you are listening to the Dr. Pearlman Podcast. And I just want to say thank you. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, I hope that this podcast provides you with some education, information, or maybe some inspiration in some way, shape, or form. But at the very least, if you get a little bit of a laugh or smile, then to be honest, I feel good about what I'm doing.
Are officially recording and super excited. All right. Everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Pearlman Podcast. And in this episode, I am sitting down with Mr. Mark Preisman. And welcome to the apartment complex.
Thank you very much.
And this has been a few months now, many months in the making. And before I have Mark tell us about himself, and before we get carried away with all things nutrition, supplementation, healthy lifestyle living, natural, healthy wellness, lifestyle living, why don't you, because I'm going to do this different. I'm not going to make the introduction I usually do. So Mark, tell everyone who's listening, how did you become Mark Preisman, nutritional consultant guru, and someone that has influenced me so greatly in the last few months ever since I met you?
Well, for one thing, I didn't instantly become a guru. There's no way do we wave a magic wand and you're a nutrition guru. I really learned the hard way, and my life path was sort of directed by early circumstances. As a kid, right now I'm not a kid anymore. I'm 77 years old, very blessed to have made it this far down the path. But I was very overweight as a kid and was bullied quite a bit about it. Loved to eat. Big, drippy peanut butter jelly sandwiches on white bread were my passion. And it had nothing to do with whether I was hungry. I just loved those foods. And as a result, I became very overweight and really miserable. And that was in my early teens. Well, I was fortunate to have some people in my life who were a good influence on me. And when I got to my late 20s, I realized I just had to make a change, And, I started reading as much as I could. I found out things that apparently worked for me, helped decrease appetite, helped me start losing some of this fat, this what they call deep visceral obesity. And that became a tremendous motivator. It's one thing to read about something, and it's fascinating. It's another when, hey, wait a minute, this stuff actually works. This doesn't just tickle your brain. I mean, it really works and produces results. And that's why I became hungry for information and knowledge, and not just hungry for foods that were just making me feel miserable about myself. So people would, of course, ask, well, Mark, how are you doing this? And you start sharing it with them. And some people will be interested, others glaze over and say, oh, well, you're a health nut. My mom always used to say, look, you can be a health nut, you can be a sick nut. So I decided I would be a health nut. And I enjoy doing that. I find it very satisfying to be able to assist other people. And yes, I do take a good variety of supplements. People always ask, how many vitamins do you take a day? That's just sort of a classical question. In all honesty, I've never counted. And a lot of what I take isn't vitamins. There's minerals, there's herbs, there's all sorts of things that you can do to help yourself. And I found it was worked for me. Yep. But it's not in the number of pills. You've got to know what's right for you. And we're all as individuals are fingerprints. Right. There's no average fingerprint. So you've got to be willing to do some studying And I found, for me, I didn't have to adhere to just one particular diet. Like, you don't have to be paleo and then put yourself in a paleo straitjacket where you dare not vary from it. Right. You don't have to be perfect keto, although there were certainly situations that can be very effective for many people.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a strict vegetarian. Some of the least healthy people I've seen are people who are strict vegetarians. There's the junketarians. They just eat junk food that isn't from animals.
And that's actually, we're going to definitely talk about that in depth, because one of the things that Mark Sisson, the author of the Primal Blueprint, talks about, especially now, is that metabolic flexibility. And again, I don't want to jump in full bore to it right now, but I mean, it almost brings up this concept of moderation, and then people will hear him maybe say that, and then they hear somebody like me who for months and months and months went on about how much I promote the ketogenic diet because of how well it worked for me over a sustained 6 to 8 month period. And then I ate a clean keto with more carb kind of diet for another almost a year after that. But I've developed that metabolic flexibility, but the idea of moderation is what takes us down this slippery slope of potentially a beer a night, potentially a candy bar a day and a cookie a night. And we're going to talk about that because, again, strict paleo window, vegetarian, raw, vegan diet. But one of the things I want people to know is what impressed me the most about you, other than your knowledge, was you're an older gentleman. But I mean,
I'm just old.
But you've been doing this a long time, and you and I were talking. I mean, and you're on it. I mean, you are just sharp as a tack. You turned me on to some amazing research that I hadn't seen before in terms of the
setolytics.
Mm-hmm. So you turned me on to the setolytics and looking into how that could potentially be anti-carcinogenic, for lack of a better word, right? Mm-hmm. And we're going to get into all this, but how did you become a nutrition consultant? What is your degrees? They're pieces of paper. Sometimes they mean something, sometimes they don't. But what was your background? Like, how far did you get to, kind of be able to coach and help so many people with weight loss, GI issues, and so forth and so on?
Well, it's very interesting the way it happened. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, I worked in health clubs for a while. I worked for a variety of weight control programs of varying qualities. But then one day, I guess maybe it's divinely ordained or maybe just pure dumb luck or a mix of the two, I saw an ad in the newspaper. These people were looking for someone to work in a quote-unquote health food store working with customers. I said, well, it might be of interest because it seemed to crystallize in a nutshell what I was interested in. So I went in, applied for the job, got it in 1979, and here it is, 2021. I spent more time working in the nutrition business than Moses spent in the desert. So
you split a few Red Seas.
Yes, sometimes it feels like that.
Yeah.
But it's been a very satisfying journey, but at times very frustrating, mm-hmm. because I know many of our listeners, our heads are spinning when we hear all this information, nutritional information, and more often misinformation on TV and on the internet. One day, this is good for you. Oh, no, don't do that. It's going to kill you. What's a mother to do,
I got to ask, what do you think the greatest misinformation out there right now is? I mean, it's hard to just pick one, but what's like grinds your gears when you hear it?
Vitamins don't work, mm-hmm. or eat a balanced diet.
Right.
What does that mean? Or you'll see a commercial for some boxed cereal. It says, make this cereal a part of your healthy diet. Yeah, it's the lousy, unhealthy part of your healthy diet. So some of the greatest misinformation is balanced out. What does that even mean? I mean, if it's going to be a balanced diet, if you eat a piece of beef, does that mean eat some of the horn, eat some of the hide, eat some of the hoof? That would be the balance.
Yeah.
So they say, eat some carbs, eat some sugar, eat some vegetables, eat some fruit, eat some meat. And
have these healthy whole grains.
Oh, whole grains. Yeah, this has become a mantra. That's a healthy thing to do. Humans were never designed to digest grains. The bread we eat now is not, as Mark Hyman says, it's not the bread we ate. 10,000 years ago, if you made bread, you could stand on it.
You know what's amazing is I asked you what's the number one thing, and you talk about like balance, right? Like eat a balanced diet, like what does that mean? Or vitamins are bad for you? And I just had a video where I ranted about how Cheerios gets to make these commercials that say part of a heart healthy breakfast, reducing your cholesterol. And I said, and here you are saying, and we haven't talked about this before.
No, we're just freeform here.
Freeform podcast. The reality is, I said in my little 1 minute rant on Instagram, Dr. Pearlman TV, I said, the only thing Cheerios is good for is diabetes. And, you know, I stand by that. So let's talk a little bit more about that. A balanced diet. People are wrong, or anyone who says something like that. Again, this ties back into that whole concept of moderation. One of the things we talked about, right? The outline I sent you, people don't know where to turn. I get people questioning me every single day now. In the beginning, it was one in a while. Now every day. Can I have this snack on keto? How many ounces of beef should I have? Can I have white rice with this, that, and the other thing? Why don't you like oatmeal as a cereal? So why don't you inform the listeners? I mean, what's going on? What should we be eating when it comes to a healthy breakfast? Is it individualized to, you know, their gut microbiome? Let's get into it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've found is we, as individuals, we are all completely unique. And I've always felt that your body will give you a report card on what you do. If you eat a particular food and you end up with gas and bloating and you feel like a beached whale, well, I don't care which expert, quote unquote expert, says it's good for you. Your body's saying, I can't digest this garbage. Please don't do it anymore. So, or you see things, you know, people get stomach acid. Well, they take this pill and it shows them eating the same garbage that their body said it can't digest, but you're trying to force it to do that. So it's just crucially important, I think, that we try first and foremost to eat actual, real food. And I say that because I have a real fascination with the way food is advertised these days, the psychology they're using, and how they're trying to build their sales, of course. And most of these quote-unquote foods, or as Mark Collin says, these are somebody's idea of food, or they're food-like substances. These are designed for entertainment. Look at the advertising. The guys at the Sonic Drive-In, you know, they're sitting in the car, they're very witty and charming, and here they are putting this stuff away and laughing and have a good time. Never in the commercial does it tell you what this does. We should enjoy eating. We should enjoy food. But we should eat when we're actually hungry, and we should give ourselves food that isn't the equivalent of shooting yourself in the foot, or in the heart, or in the lungs, or in the brain. So we must, I think, as much as possible, eat real food. This is not to say that you have to put yourself in a gastronomical straitjacket where you can't ever enjoy yourself. Eating should provide more joy than just going to the gas station and filling your tank. We should enjoy food, but let it be real food. Because if you're going to spend the rest of your life sitting in a doctor's office on all kinds of pharmaceuticals, and there's a time and a place for pharmaceuticals, not every time and not every place, you know, we need to be taking in food that actually is real food.
This is, I'm tempted, right, to ask the question,
away.
How does one begin to know their body to be able to give them a report card of what they've eaten, which you did kind of answer: gas, bloating, it's not digesting right, it's making you feel like crap.
The fatigue, headaches, disrupted sleep.
So then rather than ask that, because it might be straightforward at this point, at least to most of our listeners, I think the real question becomes, what's the first step to combat that? Whether it's something like a fennel seed or artichoke or something where you turn me on to some articles about whether that's going to decrease some of the or allow better peristalsis, or certainly turn off some of the enzymes that create the methane gas. What about going at it from like a gut rehab? Like, what is your number one? Like, say you've got a patient sitting across from right now, Mark, I just can't stop this bloating, gas. My doctor told me to eat more fiber. It's just everything's falling apart. What do they do? Where do they start?
Okay, one thing, when it comes to gas and bloating, the first thing most people want to do is go get one of the advertised probiotics, most of which I have to say are useless. Again, getting back to the average fingerprint, there's no average, quote unquote, microbiome. We've got trillions of these guys and many different varieties in the intestine. So the first thing to do isn't to run out and buy a prebiotic and then keep on eating what you're eating, because that's like trying to put a forest fire over the stop sign. It's not, in most cases, it's really not going to be effective. I think first and foremost, you've got to look at eating the foods for which we were originally designed to eat. And when you go into the grocery store, most of what you see there is not designed even to be digestible. It just isn't. It's designed to make money for the food processors. There's a great book out now. I've seen some interviews with the author. I haven't read the book yet, but I will read and digest it in the near future. It's called Hooked. Very meaningful, because it talks about how the designers of these highly processed foods are trying to hit what they call the bliss point, where it's got the perfect mouthfeel, the perfect amount of salt, the perfect amount of sugar, the perfect amount of fat, to where you do not want to stop eating it. And then on top of all this is going to sound blazingly paranoid. It's not. I'm not blazing, I'm not even moderately paranoid. Yeah. Even paranoids have enemies, but, as they say. But there's a brilliant MD named Russell Blaylock who wrote a book many years ago called Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills. These are the things that they add to the foods where they say you can't eat just one. They tickle the addiction part of our brain. And to get technical, it's called the nucleus accumbens. This is where our food addictions are built. So they add a lot of things that are related to MSG. These are called glutamates. They're called excitotoxins. And your taste buds do not end at the roof of the mouth. They extend into your brain. And if you overexcite these neurons, at some point, they're going to die. So I think first and foremost, you just got to open your refrigerator and take a hard look at it and realize this is not going to be an easy ride. It's going to be difficult. There's a great quote. It says, each man must choose one of two pains, the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Yep. And
you sent that to me about a week ago. I remember I saw it.
It really, really strikes me. And the part of your brain that's going to be listening to this or thinking, I can't give up these foods. I really enjoy them. There's so much pleasure involved in them. Well, we have a relationship with food. In all honesty, you're not really giving up Twinkies. You're trading them for something better. If you go buy a new car, you bring in your old car as a trade-in. You're not giving up your old car. You're trading it in for something new and improved. Yep. The deal is coming to grips with it and not being harsh with yourself and say, I can't live without this. I've got to have this food. I don't know what I'm going to do. Yep. Listen to yourself talk.
And hearing you say this, it really just kind of aligns perfectly for me to jump in and add. If you think it's what the younger kids are saying now, YOLO, right? You only live once, and they're thinking, I'm not going to deprive myself of anything. But when you're stimulating this nucleus accumbens part of your brain, when you are constantly releasing and triggering the dopamine or reward center, or triggering the parts of your brain that want more and more sugar, that has the same type of addictive properties as cocaine and various other bad drugs. Yes. When you keep living that life, you are going to end up probably about 40-something with heart disease, diabetes, obesity, vulnerable to all sorts of pathogens, viruses, diseases. And then how is that living? That's not living. You're just dying slowly. You're dying early. You're dying prematurely. And that's like kind of the message that I'm hearing from you. And I'm re-emphasizing that, in my words here.
I'm always mentioning names of books and authors because there's stuff I really get excited about when I read it. And I always want to find a way to share it with people who will listen. I'm not trying to force anything down anybody's throat. But the name of the book is called The Hacking of the American Mind by an MD named Robert Lustig, who's written many books on sugar. Yeah. And in this particular book, he writes a lot about something called neuromarketing, where whatever it is, whether it's a new shirt or a new car, shoes or Twinkies, this is a pleasurable, rewarding experience. Humans are built to seek reward, whether it's food or reproduction or shelter or physical comfort. But what happens, dopamine is a pleasure chemical, but by its very nature, it's very fleeting. Serotonin, which is more contentment and true happiness, that's the way you really want to go, because you don't really get addicted to contentment. Have you ever been feeling just a nice, peaceful feeling? I need to get deeper feeling of peace. I need to get more contented. Come on, what can I do to get more contented? But the more dopamine you stimulate, the less contented you're going to be. You're going to seek more pleasure. I mean, you look at what's happening to all these terrible drug epidemics that are killing people off by the thousands. That doesn't produce contentment. And the things that produce contentment, are helping other people, emphasizing your serotonin system, not your dopamine system. Sure, you want to have pleasure, but if it's unbalanced, the more pleasure you get, the less serotonin you're going to have. So it's important to not confuse pleasure with peace and contentment and happiness. Not the same thing. Right. So this all boils down to, again, looking at the food that we eat, or the so-called food we eat. Make sure it's food. Yep. Again, it's like getting a divorce. No, but goodbye Twinkies, arrivederci, I'm never going to see you again. Look at these things as maybe an occasional treat. But if you're going to make that your daily song and dance, you're not going to be singing very well, you're not going to be dancing very well, because you're going to be in a lot of physical pain, you're going to have a lot of inflammation. Before you know it, you're forgetting your own name, you're going to end up with cognitive decline, which is now also a national epidemic. So I tend to go off on tangents with this because there's so many thoughts that pop into mind when Yoni asks this kind of question. Yeah. But I'm just trying to get information out there, because I hope some of our listeners will say, hey, wait a minute, I think I can do something with this.
Yeah. And that's the goal. Don't get me wrong. I'm just as guilty as the next person going down rabbit holes and getting on tangents.
Hey, mea culpa.
Yeah. And that's why we get along so well. It's the passion. It's, the message. It's like it needs to be screamed louder from more rooftops, from more people. Because really, we're looking at generations of younger family members struggling with not just the financial burden of taking care of somebody who is declining fast, but then the emotional burden. That's one of the reasons that got me here. And I'm not going to go in the whole story because I've told it before on podcasts. But my family, I lost my dad to cancer when he was 39 and I was about 16, I believe. Oh my God. I watched my grandmother die of leukemia. And then I remember on her deathbed, she pretty much blamed it on the, She blamed it on the fake sugar packets, the sucralose ones.
Yes, saccharin, sweet and low.
Yeah, the sweet and lows and those kinds of things at the time. Look, who really knows? But she was, her whole life, obesity on everyone within my family, minus maybe like a sister, someone with a bariatric surgery. And then I've watched her put a lot of the weight back on. And it's very sad because, again, I'm screaming the stuff from the rooftops and I'm showing them how to kind of wean into a healthy, whole food way of eating. And, the vitamins that may be, efficacious to take. And but again, without getting down the rabbit hole, but back on par, right? GI issues, eating whole foods. I like to recommend a product called Revital X to a lot of my patients when they're trying to get rid of some gas, bloating, irritable bowel-like symptoms.
I'm not familiar with it.
And I'm happy to say that, and I don't even know who makes it, and again, no financial incentive to me, but this Revital X, this powder, what's amazing is it has all these properties that seem to support the research in terms of fixing things like these tight junctions in the GI that aren't absorbing nutrients, i.e. leaky gut. So would you care to elaborate or let's educate some people on why L-glutamine seems to work so well, why quercetin is so versatile and seems to be one of the other number one recommended sources for healing, not just leaky gut, but some of these irritable bowel type diseases?
Well, yeah, you heard him mention tight junctions. Yeah. For a lot of people, that's going to be, what in the world is a tight junction? It's going to sound like a place where I can't squeeze through.
Right.
Well, your intestine, each of us comes complete with about 30 feet of digestive tract. Mm-hmm. Well, when you swallow food or whatever, it doesn't just happily get absorbed 100% and make its way to all your cells and everybody lives happily ever after. The intestine very carefully manages what can get through and what cannot get through. Mm-hmm. But a lot of our gut problems are aggravated by the justifiably criticized glyphosate or Roundup. One of the problems with this is practically on everything. Yeah, unless you're eating organic, and even if you're eating organic foods, there's going to be a tiny amount because we're living in the 21st century. But what glyphosate does, And this will be a tremendous aggravator of virtually all intestinal problems, whether it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, inflammatory bowel disease. Glyphosate ruins these tight junctions. It's like Velcro. And the technical name is called the zonula occludens. Mm-hmm. And when you take glyphosate, it causes the zonulins just to open up the intestinal tight junctions where everything can get through, things that weren't ever supposed to get to your bloodstream. And when they get there, they float to your organs, they float to your joints, they float to your thyroid, to your brain, and the body goes, what in the H is this all about? So it starts sending out its own cells to attack this stuff. This is called autoimmune disease. This isn't going to be the cause for every autoimmune disease, but it's going to be definitely a contributing factor in many, if not most cases. And this stuff is ubiquitous. We've got to be careful to avoid it. And I know sometimes when people talk about eating organic, a lot of people roll their eyes. It sounds so prissy and fussy and neurotic. I eat organic. Mm-hmm. Well, let's say you're in a restaurant. You order a salad, and they bring you the salad. And the waiter comes and he's got a sprayer full of all kinds of pesticides. So he's like, pesticides on your salad? Well, no. Well, you don't have to. It's already there. It's already there. This stuff is designed to kill bugs and mold and fungus. Well, it may kill them instantly. For us, it's going to take longer. And getting old, and I guess at 77, I guess I'm old. I don't have any chronic issues, little tiny things, but, I don't have chronic pain. I sleep like a baby, and I'm vain enough to where I want to have a nice appearance, but that's going to be a reflection of good, clean living, as clean as I can get it, still be a human being. But I guess in a roundabout way, I addressed your question.
And it did.
Yeah.
And the thing that I want to know is, does that mean when a doctor tells their patient who's having GI symptoms, maybe they go to the gastroenterologist, which I have nothing against, but maybe I do have a little against if someone says, well, eat a little better, like we talked about earlier, balance, and they say eat vegetables. I mean, that almost sounds like go eat glyphosate. That's the advice that I'm kind of hearing.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunately, unless you're going out of your way to get organic vegetables, it's going to be on there because glyphosate was originally designed as a weed killer. Mm-hmm. It causes the weeds to dry up, and it kills them because it destroys the living microbiome that's in that weed. In fact, on the plant, it destroys the microbiome in that plant. Mm-hmm. And it does the same thing with our intestinal microbiome. Mm-hmm. We were talking about dopamine and serotonin earlier. Well, about 50% of your dopamine, about 90% of your serotonin is not produced in your brain. It's produced by the gut microbiome. Yeah. So, if you're doing...
Our first brain, the gut.
Because if you're killing off these guys that make your own feel good and feel balanced chemicals, how are you going to feel good? I mean, you look at... This is kind of going off on a limb here, but you look at the amount of anger in our society now, outrage. People are furious. They don't seem to have any impulse control. There's many contributors to that. But a lot of our mood is determined by our microbiome. Mm-hmm. And if you're killing off your own good guys, your own troops in your own body that are there to protect you, well, how can you expect that to have a good result?
As you said, autoimmune, and that was going to kind of take me into the next segue, but I don't want to skip over too fast. But I will say, I looked up something the other day because I'm starting to see more and more patients. You see more and more people struggling with what's obviously inflammation. And oh, by the way, here's a little hack for everybody out there. If you want to find out if your pain is inflammatory or mechanical, in other words, do I have a mechanical disc type pain, nerve pain, or am I really just inflamed? Go ahead and take a couple Advil, or maybe swallow a whole bunch of curcumin, the ones that come with the black pepper. Give yourself, a few hour window without eating. And if your pain seems to go away, it's probably inflammatory. And if your pain is not going away, then you need to come see a chiropractor. In particular, a chiropractor. No incentive. But the thing I was going to say is I wrote, what are the foods you should eat to avoid chronic inflammation? And the first two sites that came up, and I'm going to end up posting all these links in the description for everyone out there so you know where I'm getting this stuff from. The first two links that came up were some like
really well-funded, beautiful-looking websites, clearly some people that had their way up at the top of Google, not even the ads, but just their kind of organic listing, and it said, don't eat red meat, don't eat saturated fat, eat vegetables and whole grains, whatever. Then I went down and found the PubMed research article about, 6 spots down, and I pulled it up from 2019, I believe, and I'm going to, again, share this in the content, the notes. And it said clearly what was triggering the autoimmune antibodies, like the things that were showing in the IgG, they're called the antibodies that really they're like antibodies that swallow up and harm the antibodies from protecting against antigens. Again, autoimmune, attacking your own body. Okay, it said basically vegetables and whole grains, including rice, are the most autoimmune triggering in I think it was something like 800 participants. And they actually said something like it was egg yolks, beef, and fish to be the absolute least. Oh, and the vegetable that was on there were all any cooked vegetables and avocado that were the least autoimmune triggering. So again, it's like we're getting all this bad information from people that have this, agenda, and the real information, the efficacious peer-reviewed literature, and in particular, the meta-analyses and the systemic reviews that kind of show the numbers. You can't really ignore the numbers when you're analyzing, 5 or 6 various randomized controlled trials with thousands of participants. That seems to be where things are very clear, talking about whole foods, right? Non-anti-inflammatory, which really, I want to say then, there's no such thing maybe as a superfood, but do you think that there are certain things that people are like, they can eat this, like it's fall-proof, that you would say are real foods that Mark Preisman says, eat this and you'll be okay?
I have a certain, I really try to follow as much as possible in a quote-unquote anti-inflammatory diet, which means eliminating some of the most popular stuff on the planet. I don't use seed oils, which basically things like corn oil. Corn is actually not a seed, it's a grain. But corn oil, safflower oil, all of these things are like putting sugar in the tank of your car. Your body can't handle this stuff. It triggers extreme amounts of inflammation. And just briefly, we're all hearing about inflammation. The most damaging inflammation is the inflammation that doesn't directly cause pain. It's what we call silent inflammation. It's the inflammation that occurs in the linings, the walls of your arteries, in your brain, in your skin, in your eyes, in your lungs. It's more of what we call a smoldering inflammation. And your body's having to use all of its energies to deal with these toxic substances. It affects mood in people who are depressed, people who are schizophrenic. They have very high levels of what they call inflammatory cytokines. So it's not just bad luck that we're depressed. Sure, we have a lot of stress. But life has always had stress, but that doesn't mean that you have to always be in physical pain, again, having gastrointestinal problems and constipation and or diarrhea. So we've got to address the inflammation issue very strongly.
And what oils, because this is actually, you talked about seed oils right away, so this is a big thing now. So what oil should people be buying?
Well, interestingly, coconut oil is one that's well known. You want to make sure you don't get one that's been processed and deodorized and bleached to where it has no flavor. Just get organic, natural coconut oil. And there's a variety. I'm a huge fan of olive oil. And it's not because it has monounsaturated fat. Because monounsaturated fat isn't going to oxidize. There's not enough places on it for the oxygen to cause oxidation and release free radicals. But olive oil is not the monounsaturated aspect. It's what they call polyphenols. When you taste real olive oil, and about 80% of the olive oils on the American market are adulterated. They've got seed oils in them. But when you get real olive oil, you take it straight and you put it on your tongue, you're going to be getting like a burning, peppery feeling at the back of your tongue. It's not really a flavor, but it's described as a somatosensory experience. From a pain standpoint, it actually is very similar to ibuprofen and its ability to relieve pain. And don't worry about the calories in it. All these fast meals have about 120 calories a tablespoon. But olive oil is one of the reasons, it's the real secret of the Mediterranean diet. It's not the crusty bread, the vegetables are wonderful, of course, and fish is wonderful, but it's the abundant amount of olive oil they use. And it's the real deal. It's the stuff that it's not quite like horseradish, but it's in a similar ballpark. But that you want to use that kind of oil. Now I do use omega-3 fish oil. That is a polyunsaturated fat. But with a tablespoon or two a day, and you're eating other foods that are natural anti-inflammatories and antioxidants, you're going to get the benefit. But if you're eating tablespoons of corn oil and safflower oil and canola oil every day, I don't think there's enough supplements to offset that.
No, and there's not. And the sickest people I'm seeing right now are people that in large families are eating, fried foods, frying in these seed oils and vegetable oils. They're just not aware of how unhealthy they are. Generations of obesity, bloating, acne, joint pain, autoimmune-like properties, paresthesia, and in pre-diabetes, when you start to feel the neuropathies, and it's terrible. And what's amazing is, because I share a similar story to you, where I was 236 pounds in 2007, and then at the end of grad school at only 185 pounds, but I have the before and after picture somewhere online. At 185 pounds, I was getting extraordinarily sick in the same frame that is sitting across from me right now. And that was when I went on the keto diet, and I just got healthy. I mean, within a matter of 6 to 8 weeks, everything changed. And I mean, I had I was getting the blurry vision. I was running to the bathroom in the middle of labs because I could not control my, urine. I mean, it was disastrous. And I was just so heavy and tired. I couldn't believe it. And it's amazing what, and that was like the moment. I mean, first off, I was finally educated enough to kind of understand the idea of ketosis, and then to utilize it and completely transform my body and my physiology. Oh my God. And so what you're saying, yes, is like my experience too. Monounsaturated avocado oil is kind of what I say, just to kind of protect everybody from potentially having that contaminated olive oil. And I know some avocado oil is contaminated as well. I just stick to the one that I feel makes me feel the best, from Whole Foods, who I try to put my faith in Whole Foods, where I spend, 3/4 of my paycheck,
Welcome to my world.
But, okay. What is your opinion on red meat? It's kind of sort of not as hot a topic as it used to be, but what's your opinion on that?
Well, yeah, I know now, of course, it's taken to the extreme, the carnivore diet. Well, I don't think that's an ideal way to go, but I think red meat can be wonderful food. However, and this is a big however, it needs to be grass-fed and it needs to be organic.
Yep.
Cows or steers, they weren't ever designed to eat corn. They weren't designed to eat soy. That makes them fat real quick. Just like it does Americans. A Harvard nutritionist described our country as the great American feedlot. We're being fed the same foods that they use to fatten cattle. So I think red meat can be a wonderful food. I don't think you have to have it 3 times a day, but if it's organic, grass-fed, it's wonderful. But we've always heard you are what you eat. Well, you also are what you ate. And if the cattle have been fed lots of corn, if they've been given antibiotics, they've been given lots of soy, well, even though you can say, I don't eat those things, but if you're eating that animal, you're eating what it ate. So it's really important to be careful in your choice. Make it a quality food.
And we don't have to talk about this, but do you want to address the antibiotic resistance, like the bacterial, susceptibility because of these antibiotics?
Well, unfortunately, for a while, this is something nobody heard of. But now antibiotics are really losing their punch. The bacteria, they're very clever. They haven't been on this planet for billions of years because they were stupid. They adapt very quickly. In fact, certain species of bacteria, they'll share the resistance with other bacteria. They're very philanthropic in that regard, much to our detriment.
And it looks like, at least the research and some of the data that I've looked at, it looks like this is partly because of the antibiotics given to chicken, pigs, cows.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. And now science is being forced to look at alternatives because otherwise, you're having lots of old epidemics making their way back to us. about 100 years ago, I think it was in Russia or Bulgaria, maybe a little over 100 years ago, they were doing research and using what are called phages, Phages. Believe it or not, these are actually viruses. And you find them growing in the most odd and most unappealing of places. But different phages, they'll attach themselves. They're an odd-looking little creature. It looks like it's some organism that floated down from outer space.
Yeah.
It'll attach onto that virus or onto that bacteria. It feeds its substance into that bacteria, replicates, and destroys the bacteria. Most notably with E. coli, which is a very well-known cause of intestinal distress. Mm-hmm. And the bacteria can't develop resistance to this. And such things as garlic. There's just any number of things that can serve as natural antibiotics, but there's no pharmaceutical company is going to make billions of dollars selling garlic. Although the companies now are working on developing specific phages for different types of bacteria.
Yeah.
So there's millions of dollars of research going on that right now.
Well, let's get into I'd like to get into specific vitamins, minerals, supplements that people can take to strengthen things. And I think if we go kind of one at a time, and you can either say pass, we'll edit it out, or we can get into it.
Sure.
So, all right, immune protocol. Somebody who wants to feel like they have to step up with, not getting sick from viruses, whether it's the Rona or whether it's a rhino. I mean, the common cold. How can people strengthen their immune and stop being sick all the time?
Okay. Well, because I think the health of your immune system is a very good indicator of your own general health. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to look at, okay, do I just need to take large amounts of this particular vitamin or this particular mineral? Understand, all of these things interact. And very often when they test vitamins, whoever they are, pharmaceutical companies, if they fund a study, mm-hmm. they're trying to fund failure.
Yeah.
They're not going to say, oh, well, you don't need our drug anymore, just take large amounts of vitamin A. These all work together as a team. And if you just test them individually, it's like putting the best quarterback in the world out on the field without any of his defenders. You get flattened every time. It's like when you drive your car up to a store. Well, what is the active ingredient in that car that got you there? Is it the tires or the steering wheel? Or just try to drive a steering wheel. This all works together as a team. So, each of these nutrients does have a function. Mm-hmm. Vitamin A is absolutely crucial for night vision. If you don't have enough vitamin A, you don't form something in your eyes called rhodopsin, also called visual purple. You'll have lots of trouble with night vision. It'll take forever for your eyes to adjust and to walk into a relatively dark room. Mm-hmm. But if you're low on zinc, your body can't activate the vitamin A. But if you have zinc and you don't have enough B6, see, it all ties together. That's the advantage of eating foods.
Yeah.
I'm a nutrition consultant. I'm also in the food supplement business. But supplements are strictly that. They're supplements to good food, not substitutes for it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to realize that. One of the things that gets this old guy's blood pressure and blood boiling is when I see things that say, well, we tried vitamins and they didn't work. Didn't work. Well, what were they looking for? They're expecting a trip to the moon on gossamer wings. Vitamins aren't pep pills. They work in subtle ways. Like vitamin A, again, you can have poor night vision. You can have skin issues. You're going to be more prone to respiratory tract infections.
Did I hear vitamin A for wound healing as well?
Oh, yeah, very important for wound healing. It's epithelial, skin health.
Only topically or when ingested orally?
Well, no, I guess you could apply this vitamin A and D oil and lotion. Is a very famous old drugstore remedy, but you've got to take it internally. Okay. Because skin still has and always will grow from the inside out. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking for healthy skin, it's got to be what you take internally. The health of your intestine reflects very well in the lining of your skin. So if you have poor intestinal health, it's going to be difficult to have a rosy, glowing, healthy complexion. Mm-hmm. But again, then the B vitamins. People debate how many B vitamins there are. Some say 9, some say 11. They ideally should come from food. But like as I'm here talking to Yoni, he's nodding his head. Well, without B vitamins, you can't go from the thought, I want to nod my head, to actually being able to do it. Mm-hmm. They help form what are called your neurotransmitters. You have excitatory neurotransmitters like the accelerator in your car, or you have inhibitory neurotransmitters, which are like the brakes. If you're low on B vitamins, you're not going to form them correctly.
Right.
If you eat a piece of our grass-fed or organic beef, well, how does that protein from that animal become part of your bicep? Well, without B vitamins, the message can't get from your DNA to your RNA to go out and gather the proper amino acids to form that muscle. So if folks are trying to solve their health issues by getting a multivitamin, it's what I call a great landing at the wrong airport. Because we can't get what we need just through supplements. And I'm in the supplement business. But there's supplements to good food, not substitutes for it. Now, talking about the common cold, nasal allergies, there is one interesting thing I ran into about a year ago that can be surprisingly effective. Although I must say, if you want to try it, ask your physician first. I must kneel low to the physician. They do a lot of wonderful things, but nutrition is not their long suit. There's a specific type of zinc that comes in a lozenge that is of a size that looks like a monument in honor of a mineral rather than the mineral itself. That is what they call zinc acetate. It's put out by a company called Life Extension Foundation. I don't get rewarded from them. I'm not getting paid. But you put this lozenge in your mouth, and if you put it in the early stages of a cold, as weird as it sounds, there actually is something called the mouth-nose zinc closed bioelectrical circuit.
Wow.
There's Dr. Nordenstrom, a Swedish fellow, who did a lot of research on this years ago. But then there was a Dr. Eby at the University of Texas who discovered this really somewhat serendipitously for colds. He had a daughter many, many years ago who had leukemia, and she was getting a lot of toxic therapies to try to keep her alive. But she was getting these frequent colds, severe colds, and he was giving her zinc tablets, regular zinc tablets. And her throat was so sore, she couldn't swallow it. So she was letting these terrible tasting things dissolve in her mouth, and he discovered this was helping resolve her colds. Well, he found there's a specific type of zinc that fits into this mouth-nosed, zinc-closed bioelectrical circuit. I get to say that all day long, that's why I said it without stuttering. But it inhibits the ability of the virus to replicate in the nose and in the sinuses. It also can be very effective for allergies. And it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, but realize when you open the container and look at it, this is not intended to swallow it. Otherwise, you need to have someone who can administer a Heimlich maneuver pronto. Just let this off in your mouth. It takes about 10 minutes. I take one a day just automatically, because very often people don't come to see me until they're feeling sick, and I don't want to get the gift that keeps on giving. So.
That's like right there. So it's a preventative type of measure, would you say?
It can be preventive, but also can be used most effectively if you're in the early stages, where you're starting to get that scratchy feel at the back of your throat. Oh, God, here we go again. So you feel it coming on.
Okay.
Take it. It's zinc. It's an essential nutrient.
All right.
And unless you take goofy, loony amounts, you're going to be fine.
And that is, you said, did you say acetate?
Zinc acetate.
Acetate. Okay. I just made a video recently about which zinc to take. And I was more, I think, on the line of the gluconate, if I'm even saying that right.
Well, gluconate, zinc methionine. Zinc methionate is a very good one.
Yep.
Zinc sulfate I wouldn't use because it can cause nausea. Quite often it needs to be taken with food. But taking zinc internally for the things that zinc does, you don't have to use the acetate. But for what we were just talking about with respiratory distress and nasal allergies and a drippy nose and a sore throat, it works very, very effectively.
And now what about vitamin D coupled with that, or how often are you recommending for people to dose up on vitamin D?
Well, there's a lot of controversy now in this vitamin D area. And it's fascinating to me because for so long, when I first got into the nutrition business, I was always told, do not ever, my original trainers, do not ever go over 400 international units of vitamin D a day. It's toxic. Well, now, they're giving that to newborn babies practically.
Yeah, and if you're not taking 5,000, you're allegedly susceptible to all sorts of diseases.
Yeah. I take more than 5,000 a day. Of course, again, I'm a senior citizen, and I want to prop up my immune system. But originally, vitamin D was thought of as just important for bone health.
Right.
And it does play a role in that. But they've discovered also human beings have about 22,000 genes, more or less. Well, zinc or vitamin D is involved in over 2,000 of them. If you're low on vitamin D, and I find this most commonly in my African American customers, There's much higher level of breast cancer in African American women and much higher levels of prostate cancer in African American men. Almost invariably, if they bring in blood work, their vitamin D levels are sometimes down just in single digits. So vitamin D is crucial for your immune system, and it's also crucial for calcium absorption. But here's another example of a tie-in, and not just using loony amounts of one nutrient. You've got to take vitamin K, what we call vitamin K2, along with your vitamin D. It serves as a traffic cop for calcium.
Yep.
You want calcium going to your bones, you want it going to your teeth. You do not want bone growing in your arteries. And the vitamin K helps direct the calcium to the right places, and it can also help pull plaque out of the arteries over a period of time. Wow. But the main caution with vitamin K is if you're taking Coumadin, because Coumadin works, which is an anticoagulant, it works by inhibiting vitamin K. Well, over the long haul, you're going to end up with you may not die of an immediate embolism or stroke, but you're setting yourself up for a lot of calcium plaque in your arteries. So that would be the only precaution I know of as far as taking vitamin K.
And they actually, I again saw an article you turned me on to, talked about a Japanese study, and they had 100 and some odd, it was like anything from 120 to 160 people versus the placebo group, been given vitamin K2 along with their vitamin D and calcium. And in the older age population, it was 40-something% increase in strong bones, and or even, I don't want to call it a reversal, and I don't want to go searching for it on my messy notes. I'm trying to, free form. But yeah, 40-something% increase in like the signs to show that they, weren't developing or reversing their osteoporosis or slowing the rate of osteoporosis to 4 weeks out was 80-something% versus the placebo group by adding the K2 to their vitamin D and calcium supplementation. And those were already people that were, we'll just say in need of it, something that was, showing along the lines of an osteopenia or osteoporosis type study for Japan. And you touched on it. I talked about vitamin D, and then you said it's got to be with the vitamin K.
Because when you look at the way osteoporosis is most commonly treated these days, the physician, with the best of intentions, will tell the female patient, take about 1,200 milligrams of vitamin D a day, or calcium rather, and about 400 to 600 milligrams of vitamin D, and then, diagnose and adios, you're sort of on your way. But in the drugs, that are supposed to help slow bone loss, they're not helping build new bone. There's a variety of pharmaceuticals, Boniva, and a number of them, and I'm sure there's a time and a place for them, but not every time and not every place. When it comes to bone health, in a nutshell, you have cells that build new bone, they're called osteoblasts. You have cells that break down old bone, they're called osteoclasts. And there needs to be a balance of those. I mean, if you're going to lose old bone, that's a signal to the body to build new bone. Well, a lot of these drugs, they're inhibiting the osteoclasts. Well, see, it may not be breaking down the old bone as much, but your body isn't getting the signal to build new bone. So what happens, you end up with this sort of porous bone. It's not really solid. It's not really solid, healthy bone. And then you end up with a rather charming potential side effect called osteonecrosis of the jaw. Your jawbone dies.
So not to interrupt, I just listened to a podcast. It was Paul Saladino, the Fundamental Health Podcast. He had on a periodontist or dentist, forgive me, I forgot exactly, but he was talking about jaw development and the importance of calcium, phosphorus, vitamin K2, and vitamin D.
Yeah.
And here you are reflecting on it.
Yeah, it's just crucially important. And the problem is, if we're not giving our bodies what they need to be able to repair and then to get rid of old or damaged tissue, how can you expect to have glowing health? I mean, we all want to live long and be healthy. We want to be financially and fiscally healthy. Excuse me, but if we're going to be physically healthy, we've got to give our body the tools it needs to repair. And if you're not doing that, and then plus you're putting in, again, so-called foods that are going to burden your body and tax it, it's just not going to work. And we see this all day, every day. And interestingly, the store where I work is right next door to a 7-Eleven. And I see people going in and out all day to the 7-Eleven, come out with these huge sugary drinks and, all kinds of sweet tarts and fast food type things. They're hungry, they're at work, they're on a break, they have a limited amount of time, but they have no idea what they're really doing to themselves with this. It's heartbreaking, especially anybody who's listening and watching us now. Yep. You've got family members, you've got children, you've got wives, husbands, mothers, fathers, grandparents, and you love them dearly and you want them to be healthy. This information is crucial for them. Very often, I'm one of the few guys who likes to go to a shopping mall and people watch. Mm. And I'll see folks walking along with their children, and I know they love those little children. They take a bullet for them. And here's the children eating some gooey bun. They don't realize that they're feeding the potential for sickness into these kids. I might sound like a killjoy or an old sourpuss saying, don't give your kid these things. How can you deprive your children of this? Deprive them? It's just, I don't mean to sound arrogant or egotistical with it because I'm not that kind of a person. But I see people on this path and it hurts.
And no, I mean, and that's the thing. It's a reality check. And again, nobody's saying never to do it. It's to be aware of the consistency of which most Americans, even probably most of Europe at this point, at the consistency in which we're doing it to ourselves. And again, the people around us, I don't want to talk about COVID, but if you ever needed a time in your life to believe that this virus is real and it is killing those of us that are susceptible, this is turned into something that takes everybody that has even high blood pressure. Like one of these first markers that's correlated with, diabetes and, microvascular disease and cardiovascular disease. Obesity, or if you're just a little overweight, kind of a deal. How much visceral fat do you have? So, in children being obese at rates never seen before, and now them being eligible, which is disgusting to even say this, but it's the truth, for gastric bypass surgeries and things of that nature, which should be completely off limits for young children, but it is on the table, whatever, no pun intended. So, and you're saying I don't want to sound like a killjoy. It's just the reality. And nobody's saying to feed your children, cooked broth with cooked vegetables and organic beef and organic fish, or wild caught fish only every day, all day. But yeah, we are pretty much saying find a way to make that the cornerstone of their diet. And when you look back at, should we call it not variety? The amount, quantity, 9 grams per, calorie, whatever of fat, and satiating protein that has fat in it can be, again, quite satiating and satisfying from as early an age as the child can begin to chew and swallow food, or that you can blend it for them when they're off of breast milk, because that is how you're going to develop healthy, vibrant children. That is how we can reverse our chronic inflammation in our disease, right, as adults. Yeah. And it's the only way really to do it, because the only disease, cure is in prevention. And that's kind of where we're saying this, yeah.
Very interesting. You talk about cravings for foods. In what we eat, what we don't eat. I have parents all the time. They're worried about what their kids are eating because their kids are overweight. How do I stop him or her from eating this? Well, it's very, very interesting. If the refrigerator is filled with those things and that's what you provide, well, you're not stopping it. You're literally feeding the process. Mm-hmm. But I heard something very interesting. I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about some research done with appetite for certain foods. And they discovered what the mother eats during pregnancy makes it to the uterus. And a lot of these kids, shortly after they're born, when they're still babies, they can expose them to the smell of certain foods. Mm-hmm. Like if the mother loved broccoli or Brussels sprouts, the kid will kind of make a smile. If the mother was eating gooey buns and RC Cola, and Big Macs and all that, well, then the children responded positively to those. So you do have probably never a better chance to affect what a child eats is when it's in the womb and it can't dodge your spoon or fork.
Yeah.
You know.
I think you have a soft spot for Cinnabon.
Cancel this podcast. Cancel it. Negate. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. Declare myself innocent.
What's your treat meal these days? What's your favorite thing to enjoy when you are kind of?
What I would consider to be a treat, most people would consider a treatment. You know, for me, if I'll have it's just going to sound absurd. You're going to think this is just nuts, but I love sockeye salmon, and I'll put some Primal Kitchen mayonnaise, which is the avocado mayonnaise on it.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was a mayonnaise-aholic. You know, this is made with the old seed oils and sugar. You know, but to me, that is so satisfying. There's a natural organic seasoning salt I put on it. You know, to me, that's let the good times roll. But I used to be a sweetaholic. I could eat an entire Sara Lee cheesecake. I wouldn't even let it take the time to unfreeze. Really, I would literally hammer the fork down into it and eat it frozen. I would eat a whole bag of cookies. Yeah. Always got a kick out of it. It's like, you know, on the top of the bag of cookies. And now convenient, easy closed container for storage.
Oh yeah, it's convenient, all right.
Yeah, store it in my belly. I'm not going to open that thing more than once. Yeah. You know, a lot of these. Well, I mean, my dad was a product of World War I Germany. You know, and I had to be a member of the Clean the Plate Club. You know, there's people starving all over the world, Mark. You got to clean your plate. Yeah. Well, if I would leave a little more on my plate, they wouldn't all be starving, probably. But again, I've kind of gone off on a tangent. But that's kind of my treat. I really no longer desire the ice creams or the cakes or candies. Although it's my birthday and my girlfriend fixes me a little something, I'm not going to say, just hand me an organic carrot. You know, I'm still going to be a human being.
Right.
You know.
And you know something? Okay, there's a perfect opportunity for me to say, and I just encourage all my patients, and I encourage anyone who's listening, you can have these sweets once you've probably been on some type of a clean whole food diet, you know, for a while. It takes time, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But do it on what we call there's a metabolic window. And Kevin, if you're listening to this, you know who you are, Kevin. Do it on that side of what I call the glycolytic window, but it's really the metabolic window. It's a scientific thing. You finish your exercise, you're in this caloric deficit, you've used your glucose, you've used a lot of your muscle glycogen. Right now your body's starving to refeed. That is the time to give your body the glucose in which it so desires, and exercise has an insulin-like effect. It's the perfect opportunity to give your body some of that time. You can time your treat meals around these exercise windows, and there's tons of science to back it up. Am I saying?
Oh yeah, you're correct. Because for muscle building, you've got to have a certain amount of insulin because that helps drive the amino acids into the muscle. Yeah. So you have to have something that's got some carbs or some glucose along with your protein. Yeah. Great. Yeah, but as you get older, you still have to maybe be a little bit more careful because built into our cells, and again, they never name these things easily. It's called the mammalian target of rapamycin, the mechanistic target of rapamycin.
That's where I was kind of hoping we might talk a little bit about. We don't have to get crazy, but go ahead and finish.
It's affectionately called mTOR.
Yeah.
And it's the part of your cells that's the build, grow, and we certainly need to have an anabolic part to us because all we're going to do is break down. Well, before you know it, you're just a pile of dust. But the problem is if all you're doing is triggering this growth and you're never allowing time for repair, and if you're constantly eating, in the old days it was, eat 6 meals a day to stimulate your metabolism, that doesn't work. In ancient times, if you're living in a cave, you're not going out eating 6 times a day. There need to be times when you don't eat. You need to give your body a chance to experience what is called autophagy, which means self-eating, your body feeding on itself.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's important for people to think, I'm going to get so hungry. There is a real difference between hunger and appetite. And this is where I always like to go back to this self-talk. If you're using food, to alter your mood, or because you're feeling, in a lot of my overweight clients, they eat because they're feeling bored or tired. Okay, don't eat if you're not hungry. I think a lot of folks have forgotten what it feels like to actually be hungry. It's like, I'm in the mood for chocolate, which can be a good food in the right form. I'm in the mood for a piece of cake, piece of pie, I want a Big Mac. Are you really hungry? Or are you just in the mood for a particular flavor, a particular mouthfeel, a particular experience? That's using food as a pharmaceutical, not as a nutritional enhancement.
Yep. And when you're talking about autophagy there, it's interesting. It almost goes down to now my brain goes ding, 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 ding. It stimulates the yoni of, I want to talk about keto and intermittent fasting, although I don't, it would take hours and hours and hours. But autophagy being also a good thing. I read an article that talked about viruses seem to actually flourish in autophagy. Yet we think of, a lot of the indigenous tribes and cultures and from all over the world, the entire continent of Africa, including the Middle East, will say like, we just starve it out. We just starve it out. And in my personal experience, when I've ever felt the sickest, fasting actually didn't work well. And it was actually at that point, juicing the crap out of these micronutrients seemed to be what got me over the hump. So actually taking in the blueberries, the strawberries, the things that are high in vitamin C, and that seemed to help the most. So I just want to say, autophagy, cool thing. Intermittent fasting, prolonged fasting from time to time. I mean, it has its benefits, much like you alluded to. And if you want to elaborate on that, please.
Yeah. I mean, not every time. It's not like you got to live in autophagy.
Yeah.
But your body does need to have rest periods. Just like you need a break at work or you need a vacation from work. Your body needs a vacation from this mass of food that we're constantly throwing into our systems. So give it a rest. Yeah.
And then, fine, so I have two questions. One is, and I should have asked this a while back, but we got on our tangents because we're both so passionate. So one is vitamin C, preventative, we should have it, or when we're sick?
Okay. Vitamin C is by definition essential for life. And very interestingly, man is one of the few creatures who cannot produce his or her own vitamin C.
We'll come back as billy goats.
Yeah, that way we would have to buy vitamin C supplements or eat vitamin C rich food. But they think earlier in our evolutionary path, our livers produced an enzyme, I think it's called levogulonolactone, something to that effect, where we can convert glucose or sugar into vitamin C. We don't do that anymore. If you have a pet dog at home, I believe they produce every day 5,000 to 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C.
So I got to start kissing my dog.
There you go. Get a transfusion or get a liver transplant or something from your dog. But we've got to have it. And if you're low on vitamin C, there's something called subclinical scurvy. The most extreme forms of scurvy is you're just bleeding and just bruising constantly. Your gums are bleeding, your nose is bleeding. The British sailors centuries ago, they would die of scurvy on board the ships. They would literally fall apart until a British physician started giving them limes. They didn't have vitamin C supplements then. That's why they called the British sailors limeys. They would eat the limes, which had enough vitamin C in it to keep them from getting scurvy. But if you have subclinical scurvy, you will tend to bruise more easily. You may experience what they call the pink toothbrush, where your gums bleed more easily. So there's any number of signs of it, but your body needs vitamin C. If you take excess, your body will just flush it out. And if you take huge amounts, vitamin C has been used as a laxative in Europe for many, many years. Yeah. So you would know if you were taking too much.
If you were to recommend to somebody milligrams per day?
Well, again, there's a great deal of individual variation. For myself, and not everybody needs to do this, I take 3 grams of a continuous release vitamin C twice a day. But the vitamin C I get, it doesn't just have, the ascorbic acid component. Vitamin C, when it occurs in nature, you look at oranges or grapefruits or tangerines, there are components within the peeling, the white part of the peeling, the white stuff that clings to the fruit. These are called bioflavonoids. And they're the stuff that is responsible for most of the benefits for vitamin C, keeping your arteries flexible, helping to relieve potentially allergies and the bruising. So again, when you try to fractionate it, you say, we're just going to take the vitamin C, we're going to take away this other stuff because it's not important, it's just the vitamin C. Mother Nature doesn't just put this stuff together because she or he, whatever, had nothing else to do. and these plants don't have these things because it knows a human being was going to come along and consume it. And gosh, I want Joe Schmo to be healthy. It does it for its own protection. Because the plant can't get up and run. They're kind of committed to the area where they live. So it needs things to protect it, against the various antagonists in its environment.
Okay. Now, the second part, or the second question I was going to ask is, how long, in your experience, does it take someone to really rehab their gut? So say they come into you and they have something like a leaky gut, they're experiencing irritable bowel, they're having a hard time. I mean, what's that experience and the time process like?
Well, typically, again, I'm not a gastroenterologist, but if you have irritable bowel, there's two main types, what they call IBS-C or IBS-D, which means irritable bowel syndrome constipation or irritable bowel syndrome diarrhea. Well, very often in the constipated form, there's an overabundance of what are called methanogenic bacteria. And methane, it occurs in nature, and there actually can be some benefits in tiny amounts. These are called gasotransmitters. Things like carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, which we don't look at in a positive light. These are gasotransmitters. But excess methane actually has a paralyzing effect on the intestine. So here again, you've got to look at the foods we're eating that are feeding these bacteria. And usually it's not going to be because you've been on a ketogenic diet or because you've been eating a lot of organic green vegetables. I mean, if you feed these bacteria, well, they're going to thrive and they're going to grow. And interestingly, they can give this crosstalk between your brain and your gut. It's called the gut-brain connection.
Oh, yeah.
And these bacteria are very good at pulling your strings. As human beings, I think we've got like 100 trillion bacteria in our bodies. Well, there's only 10 trillion cells of us that are actually human. We're more bacteria. And then if you include the DNA of the bacteria, we're over 99% bacteria. So they want you to eat the things on which they can thrive. So this is where you got to decide, hey, am I the master or am I the servant? You're going to have to just grab a hold of it and say, I'm not going to feed these methanogenic disease-causing bacteria. I'm just not going to do it. And it's like a spoiled child. I want you to throw him into the air one more time, or wants another banana. You got to, don't be harsh with yourself, because that tends to produce rebellion. You got to almost be like a nurturing parent to yourself. Reassure yourself. Say, look, it's like the old movie Network. I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore. Right. So it's got to be firm, but at the same time, do it in a kind way.
Now, we know, I mentioned this earlier, based on the article you'd sent me, we know that fennel seed with curcumin or fennel seed with ginger can be quite,
they're kind of gas relievers.
Yeah. I was thinking of, what's the word? Oh God, you just said it. Spastic. It's like an
antispasmodic.
Antispasmodic. There we go.
You're just testing me.
Yeah. Right. I was testing you, but I actually read an article also that too much colloidal silver makes the brain cells start to fry.
And you also turn blue.
I might have experimented with too much silver.
My blue, literally. Yeah.
But that is something that someone can incorporate if they're suffering, say post-meal, maybe get some benefit, but we don't want them to fall back on that. So again, if I was thinking of like time frame in your experience for some true healing, and then of course they're going to have to reintroduce foods, slowly. But in my clinical experience, I would say between 2 and 3 weeks, we can see some pretty amazing results when it comes.
If somebody's really compliant, that's expected.
Okay.
Because as soon as you stop feeding the process, many people will go through a very brief period of discomfort. Because as the bad bacteria kick the bucket, they put out a lot of toxic material. Like if you step on a bug, you see its gut squeeze out. Well, as these bad guys die, they leave little remnants of themselves, and your body has to flush it out, which can make you feel temporarily more gassy or more bloated or headachy and achy, but the garbage is on its way out. And so, and 2 to 3 weeks is a reasonable time for somebody who's really willing to take the bull by the horns. Again, That's not an easy bowl, and the horns can be rather dangerous and rather tough to deal with.
Yeah.
But if you really want to get well, you can do it. This is not our destiny to feel miserable.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be controlled, by the great food processors.
Yeah.
We don't have to be fat and tired and unhappy with ourselves.
And then going to their also owned drug clinics, prescription controlling environments that say this is the drug you need for the rest of your life to make you better. It's like, how long have you been on that, sir? Oh, I don't know, for the last 15 years. My doctor, after I did my yearly physical, said I needed this blood pressure medicine, and I also needed this heart medicine, and I also take this one here for my cholesterol. And I'm like, you take all those every day? Oh yeah, for the last 15 years. Why? Well, he said that I had some high reading on, one lab test.
You got to stay on this for life now.
It's like, you weren't feeling bad at the time? Nope. But he said I need them, or I might be at high risk. So I believed him. He's my doctor.
One thing I see a lot is people with esophageal reflux.
Yeah.
And almost invariably when they go to the physician, they get prescribed these H2 receptor antagonists, the things that cancel out this horrible stomach acid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we produce hydrochloric acid in our stomachs for a very legitimate reason. It's needed to break down proteins. It's needed to absorb many of your essential minerals. And most of what's coming up in people's throat isn't acid, it's overly alkaline. And these pharmaceuticals were never designed to be taken for years. And there's only one legitimate reason to take them. There are some people who do produce legitimately too much hydrochloric acid. It's called Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. So they really need something to reduce that. But if you're going to be taking these anti-acid drugs for a long period of time, you're increasing the likelihood of severe nutrient deficiencies. You won't be able to absorb your calcium,
Yep.
magnesium, which is needed for 300 functions in the body. You become vitamin B12 deficient, and it's crucial neurologically, not only for your red blood cells. So these things, we're all treated as if everything we have is a pharmaceutical deficiency disease.
Both me and Mark, we have nothing but, respect for, not just emergency medicine, but, applied appropriately, prescribed when needed, true medical intervention. But so much of this is preventable.
Well, and you go back more than 100, 120 years, most diseases, most causes of death were from diarrhea, tuberculosis. These are infectious diseases. Mm-hmm. What we have now, people are dying of lifestyle-related diseases.
Yep.
And
I don't think you can argue about that, because if I didn't even say this yet. Maybe when we were recording, I was going to. CNN, big publication the other day, 2020 poll. Number 1 cause of death in the United States, heart disease. Number 2, cancer. Number 3, COVID. Okay, so we're still saying we're fighting the battle against heart disease and cancer. We can reduce that. We know the science is there. Lifestyle choices. Yeah.
And I think many of the people with COVID, they had many the so-called comorbidities.
Right.
And then they died with the COVID.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if a man lives long enough, he may die with prostate cancer, not from it.
Yeah.
And then there's a real difference.
Yeah.
If you've got all, these unfortunate, unlucky or lifestyle issues that cause you to develop these comorbidities, then your body just can't handle the extra insult of COVID.
Yeah.
And you die, so the cause of death would be listed as COVID.
Yeah.
And it certainly contributed. But if you hadn't had these other lifestyle-related issues, you might have survived in fine style after having been significantly inconvenienced by it.
Yeah. And really I look at that as like, I know it's my job. I'm not going to speak for you, but clearly, like, if people want to talk about quarantining and waiting for a vaccine, and if that's truly what you believe in, go ahead. But I'll tell you, my goal is to strengthen my immune system and live in the dirt as much as we did for all the years prior, and we will adapt to these variants. But the more we run from them, the little, if we're not getting microdose contact, then that's going to we'll be more susceptible moving forward.
Yeah, Yoni's talking about it was called the hygiene theory.
No.
We've tried to sanitize our environment as much as possible. Everything's got to be clean. You've got to use hand sanitizer. You've got to have all sorts of germicidal things in your home. Well, some of the healthiest people on the planet are the kids who were raised in the country. They're dealing with the animals, and and they're exposed to all these bacteria. It's like a continuous fire drill for your body. Your body needs to have these exposure to develop the strength. It's what is called hormesis. In other words, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Okay.
Like being out in the sunlight is good for you. It doesn't mean you're going to go out and be sunburned. Lifting weights and exercising, it's physically uncomfortable. If you overdo it, well, then you can do a lot of damage. But done correctly, your body says, hey, I need to get stronger. I need to get tougher. I need to develop a resistance.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look all through ancient times. When was man ever as comfortable as we are now? We live in temperature-controlled environments. We have a comfortable bed to sleep in. We have a refrigerator full of food. It's so convenient, but I enjoy it as much as anybody, but it's just too darn easy.
Uber Eats, DoorDash.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Nothing makes me feel better than if I go catch my fish from the pond. I have not hunted yet, land hunted, but that is on my bucket list. Or, going out to the grocery store, interacting with people, smiling, saying hello, and, feeling good about life, and then going home and cooking it. I love it. I love the experience.
We're designed to interact and be with others. I think that's one of the reasons the whole COVID situation is difficult now. It's just, we're being asked to separate ourselves from friends and family.
Mark, you're being too kind. We're being told to separate. Strongly suggested.
Strongly suggested. Because it's tragic. I hear about kids, they're getting severely depressed and even sometimes committing suicide because they're so accustomed to going to school. I have to say very honestly, when I was an overweight, bullied kid, not going to school was a reason to celebrate.
Yeah.
I mean, I would listen to weather reports if it's snowing, and you'd be waiting with bated breath by the radio, for the superintendent of schools to say, school is closed today. So that was reason for me to celebrate, not just staying home. I enjoyed that. But again, it's a different era, and everybody has their own individual case.
And also for the record, when I talk about weight loss, we're never saying that everyone has to go out there being Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie or anything like that. But we've got to make the attempt to, because the science says you want longevity, you want health. You want to have a good fair amount of lean mass. You want to have non-excess body fat. You want to be able to be functional. We are designed to be, and I'm going to say this differently, gatherer hunters, because we spent more time gathering than we did hunting because of the berries and other parts of the soil that, were collected as we've evolved past just hunting, game. But all that being said, we're built for that. And we need to be ready for anything. Why would you want to be the person that maybe takes, 10 minutes to get out of bed when it is some kind of issue related to obesity and joint pain? This is the road we're headed down by, greater than 40-some to almost 50% of our nation. If I had to if I looked at cumulative data, is what I meant to say.
Well, and you look at trouble being slow to get out of bed in the morning, whether you're in too much physical pain to be able to do it swiftly, or you're just so groggy that you can't, but then you have trouble going to sleep at night. Yeah. This is because we were designed in very ancient times, at the very beginning, to have what we call a cortisol spike first thing in the morning. Now, we think of cortisol, you see advertisements against cortisol, like you want to negate all the cortisol in your body. Cortisol is a very important survival mechanism. It's your own natural cortisone. Yeah. It helps fight inflammation. In the short run, it's very useful. Right. And it helps in ancient times. If a man woke up, he had to hit the ground running. He didn't have time to go to the refrigerator and fix a cup of coffee. He didn't know he may be sleeping outside on the ground, or he's in a cave and there's a bear that's wanting to come home to where it really lives. Yeah. So he had to be able to hit the ground running. Yeah. So with so much stress, what's happening, people aren't often able to produce enough cortisol. Mm-hmm. So they're very slow in the morning, but then they have a spike of cortisol at night. Then they can't sleep. Mm-hmm. Then they go to the pharmaceuticals, to make them appear to be asleep. Just because you're horizontal and unconscious doesn't mean you're sleeping. It just means you're unconscious. Mm-hmm. Because sleep has many different phases in it, and you can't duplicate that with a pharmaceutical. Mm-hmm.
Speaking of sleep and pharmaceuticals, what about melatonin? Any input on people? I know a lot of mothers are giving children melatonin.
Yeah. Well, melatonin, for one thing, in my experience and from my studies, people are way overdosing on it. For most of us, more than 1 milligram is unnecessary. This is powerful stuff. It's released, you think primarily in what is called the pineal gland in the brain. They call it the pineal because it's shaped like a pine tree, very small pine tree. Mm-hmm. But we also produce it in our eyes, and we actually produce much more in our digestive tract. It has a great deal to do with our immune system. It's a very powerful antioxidant and very protective in the brain. But there's many things that can interfere with sleep. Mm-hmm. And melatonin in low dose can be very, very useful. You've got to look, your sleeping circumstances. If you've got a TV in that bedroom, even if the TV is off, it's putting out an electromagnetic field. If you have a lighted dial on your alarm clock, even that little bit of light can shut down your melatonin production. If you sleep with your cell phone close to your head. Again, this sounds so paranoid and so crazy, but we're surrounded by these electromagnetic fields. And we are electrical creatures. And if you disrupt that, you're causing real problems. People who sleep under electric blankets have more cancer. If you sleep under power lines, you have more cancer. I mean, it's very disruptive. Wow. So there's a lot of things involved in sleep. Obviously, if you're eating too late, if you're drinking too much coffee has, I think, like a 12 to 16 hour half-life. Mm-hmm. So if you drink coffee later in the day because you didn't sleep well the night before and you're having to overdo the coffee to get through your day, you're just feeding into that endless loop.
Yeah. That was the one podcast Jen did with me. Keto, coffee, sleep.
Oh, yeah.
I thought, never mind, actually. I was going to say I thought it was a shorter half-life, but it doesn't matter. That's like saying between 10 and 12 hours. I mean, no.
Yeah, still has plenty of,
I don't try to one-up anybody. That's not my thing. No.
I mean, genetically, some people drink coffee, they just feel miserable. Yeah. And their liver can't process it quickly enough. Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of genetic testing out there right now. Mm-hmm. I've had some, but only in the way of looking at my family line, where the ancestors all came from. But I haven't had a lot of the refined tests, and I'd like to get some of that because I think it could be very useful.
Yeah. And something for the listeners to look forward to. I'm getting my full workup: CBC, thyroid, testosterone, cholesterol, coronary calcium score. You name it. I'm doing this on the 16th. And I'm going to make a podcast. It'll be a very short one to review everything because I've been eating a ketogenic diet and high animal fat, almost carnivore, much more paleo in the last 2 to 3 months, more red meat than I've ever consumed in my entire life. And I'm going to just go over everything. And we're going to see how sick is this guy that says eat saturated fat on its own and eat lots of animal, products and fish and red meat and things of that nature.
So let's talk about just briefly the cholesterol and the HDL, LDL, the so-called good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. Yeah. There isn't a good cholesterol. There isn't a bad cholesterol. Cholesterol is cholesterol. It's just how it's carried around the body. Mm-hmm. And very often people who are on keto or a high-fat diet, they'll turn up their LDL level is high. It's like, oh my gosh, that's going to kill you. Well, the body uses LDL to carry triglycerides around the body and deliver energy to your muscles and your cells and your brain. Your brain does much better with ketones than it does with glucose. By far, it's even been a routine developed many years ago by a Johns Hopkins physician called the Blackburn Protocol, where kids who had severe epilepsy and seizure disorders, he put them on a virtually entire fat diet. And after a year or two, they could go back to a regular diet because their seizures were permanently gone. Apparently the brain wasn't doing well with glucose. Mm-hmm. So, there's just so many pathways here.
And that's the thing, you brought it up, so I'm going to go there. I mean, look, the cholesterol hypothesis is, in my opinion, one of the most damaging thing that's ever been done to humans. Putting them on a drug like a statin that depletes their ability to synthesize and utilize vitamin D. It depletes the CoQ10. It creates hypercalcemia, which is more dangerous than anything in the blood.
And diabetes.
Yeah, I mean, it is a dangerous drug. And I don't know, because maybe they can show that there's some like vasodilation effect for people that do have, some microvascular disease, that somehow they can continue to justify this.
Well, most of its benefits are anti-inflammatory within the arterial intima. It'll have an anti-inflammatory effect.
Yeah.
But you don't need statins to do that. And blaming cholesterol for heart disease is like blaming firemen for fires.
Right.
Every time you go by a fire, there's those guys in their red trucks. That's what causes it. There's a reason why your body makes so much cholesterol.
Yeah.
It's not doing it to kill you off. You can't make your hormones. Most of the so-called steroid hormones. All steroid hormone is a hormone that requires cholesterol in order to be formed.
That's right.
So very often I have guys with low testosterone come in. They want something to boost their testosterone. They'll have a large belly, which is often goes along with insulin resistance and inflammation. Are you on a statin? Oh, yes. And they're very proud of their cholesterol, which is around 120 or 130. You don't want to get it under 160. There was a doctor many years ago named Nathan Pritikin, who was a huge fan of ultra-low-fat diets. And he ultimately committed suicide. He had severe depression. And when they tested his arteries were clear. But without the cholesterol, he became severely depressed. Mm-hmm. So we need cholesterol. You can't make your testosterone without it. So to artificially decrease your cholesterol and decrease your LDL and think that's going to protect your heart, most people with heart attacks have completely normal cholesterol, or sometimes even higher cholesterol. Years ago, having a 300 cholesterol was considered normal. Mm-hmm. But it's become a huge profit center. Mm-hmm. Okay, this said, if your physician or cardiologist has put you on a statin, mm-hmm. listen to them, do what they say, but that doesn't mean you have to just close your brain for business. Mm-hmm. Research it, look at it. Cardiovascular health has many independent risk factors. Excess inflammation, homocysteine levels, prothrombin, these are things that in the liver that help form clots. Mm-hmm. But as you already mentioned, the cholesterol drugs, the statins, it shuts down vitamin D production, it shuts down coenzyme Q10 production. And then something I've been reading about recently from a Thai PhD named Dr. Barry Tan, there's an element that's produced in the liver. It's called geranyl. This actually helps you produce more of your own testosterone. It's responsible for a lot of the benefits of cholesterol. It's very anti-inflammatory. It's been shown to help improve what we call brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the ability to form new nerve cells. Mm-hmm. So I've been reading about that. So when you stick a drug in there because you just want to have a happy number on your lipid profile, you're throwing a monkey wrench into your machinery.
And, if I may, there's study after study that cites, shows that it's in the presence of high insulin where the cholesterol would then become oxidized. Right. So it's not like when we're making, again, 90-ish% of our cholesterol in our liver, or maybe we're eating some egg yolks or saturated fat, like on its own with some good, protein, whether it's fish or animal or otherwise, or from olive oil, right? It's when afterwards we're eating our Wonder Bread or our sticky bun with it. And that's the kind of thing that is creating this these reactive oxygen species, or these unstable molecules in our body that create all this inflammation, that create potential clogged arteries and microvascular disease.
Because the body can use cholesterol almost as you would use a patch mm-hmm. on a damaged tire. Let's say you have a damage inside the arterial intima, which is the inner wall of the artery, mm-hmm. and it's damaged by oxidation or whatever. Mm-hmm. Basically, oxidation is rust. Well, the body would just stick a little particle of cholesterol on that to block as a patch. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. If you have patches on top of patches, and it's occurring in most of your coronary vasculature, at some point, blood flow is going to be impeded, and you're also going to have calcium involved in that patch that holds the whole thing together. Mm-hmm. And this is where a coronary artery calcium score is very important to know about. And I haven't had it done yet, but it's a relatively inexpensive test. Yeah. And it will show if you've got a low coronary artery calcium score, the chances that you're going to die of vascular heart disease is going to be very, very slight. There's other things that can affect heart health, yeah. But if you don't have plaque in there, your vasculature is going to be very healthy.
And speaking of oxidation, or speaking of antioxidant or things of that nature, N-acetylcysteine, NAC, mm-hmm. You stand behind that? Or you like? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Very familiar with that. Okay. Yeah, N-acetylcysteine is what we call a sulfur-containing amino acid. Mm-hmm. And whenever one of my clients buys it, I caution them: when you open the container, do not expect Chanel number 5, because it has a sulfury smell to it. This will not come through your breath. It will not come through your pores. This is not like eating garlic, although garlic has lots of sulfur compounds in it too. And N-acetylcysteine.
I'm listening to you. I'm just going to move it a little closer. Go back to being comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay.
N-acetylcysteine is a very powerful protector of the liver, and it helps to make something called glutathione. Glutathione is the body's most powerful antioxidant. It's like just a built-in anti-rust factor. Very often it's used medically for people with overdosed on Tylenol. It'll help regenerate the we call glutathione peroxidase, which has been depleted, by your Tylenols and Advils and acetaminophen.
And I've known 2 people, that means in my short time, not just in practice, and in my internships and through school, I've seen 2 people, real life, young, overdose on Tylenol that needed medical intervention. Real thing. Happens all the time because people are out there in pain, taking Tylenol for their headaches and whatnot, and they're just damaging their liver.
I know I used to, I would take it before workouts just routinely, before I knew better. And there's a much increased incidence of heart attacks in people who use ibuprofen. Because what the ibuprofen does, just briefly, it interferes with something called cyclooxygenase 2, referred to as COX-2. Okay, well, if you're decreasing that, well, the things that are used to increase COX-2 will be used for something else. And this will be most notably something called thromboxane, which causes thrombi or blood clots. So if you're taking large amounts or consistent doses of Tylenol and Advil, you're feeding that process.
Hence the reason it was suggested not to take Advil during the COVID pandemic.
That's right. You need to have some inflammatory response. Although what's killing people, is this ultra, what they call the cytokine storm, an extreme inflammatory response, which is like burning down the barn to get rid of the rats. It's just like everything you do is like, well, there's a reason not to do it. Everything that's good for you, well, you shouldn't eat meat because of this. Well, you shouldn't eat too many vegetables because they use pesticides. It's like, so what am I going to do? There's a class of people called breatharians, which is nonsense. All I'm going to do is just breathe and be careful about the air you breathe and where you breathe it. Crying out loud, just sit in the corner and shiver and dare not go outside. I mean, you've got to live and enjoy your life, but it doesn't mean you have to put yourself in some kind of a straitjacket to enjoy your life. You have some enjoyment, but make the right decision most of the time. Because we really know what the right decisions are. We just listen to we all have our own little, what I call an internal con artist. I mean, if you want to eat, again, the sticky buns or gooey buns or, whatever, I mean, your brain knows what to tell you to get you to do it. Oh, come on, just this one time. Or start your diet on January 1st, which buys you some guilt-free time to gorge, prior to January 1st. So be aware of your self-talk. Because as Dr. Daniel Amen, very brilliant psychiatrist, just a brilliant man, he says, sometimes your brain lies to you. It really does. And we just scoop it up and accept it. We'll accept the alibi. We want to do what we want. But you've got to listen to what you're saying to yourself. It's really quite a fascinating process. And I think a lot of our so-called inability to adhere to a diet, that is a 4-letter word and I don't like it, we're just telling ourselves we can't do it, it's too inconvenient, I'm going to die of something someday anyway, and it's just all these alibis. But just listen to what you say and then make the decisions that you know are right.
Do and by the way, no, amen, truly. What I want to know is, okay, so 2 things. Hearing you say that kind of sort of took me back a little bit to everything in moderation land, but I want to just kind of elaborate on that a little bit. And if you're hearing background noise, everybody, it's because we're outside right on a main road. Even though we were very fortunate to get this this area to podcast in the building here in Addison, but then had no electricity in the optimal position. So, it was a little technical difficulty to start.
But through iron shot willpower and determination,
right.
We are here for you today.
We will persevere.
Yes, we will not be crushed.
So yeah, everything in moderation. Let's try to kind of put that to rest, at least, because I tell my patients that if they're not going to give themselves, it's not me, 2 to 3 months to follow something. Basically, we're asking them, P90X, right? 90 days, 60 to 90 days for the rest of your life to develop these new habits, to create the mindset and the self-talk that, like, this is what it's going to be. So how do we get away from this everything in moderation model?
Okay, well, I think, for one thing, everything in moderation, it has a very appealing sound to it. I would say some things in moderation. Like I wouldn't say heroin in moderation,
right.
Crack cocaine in moderation. There's some things, no. Just don't do it. And if you do it, hopefully you live to tell the tale. But as far as moderation, what is moderation? That means look at some of the things in terms of certain foods, have them once in a while, but don't make them part of your just daily routines of daily living. Or just going out and getting the fast food because it's convenient. Mm-hmm. Well, it may seem convenient, but that's an illusion, because there's other inconveniences that come with it. You don't like the way you look, you don't like the way you feel, you have a headache, you're in pain, you're getting fat, you're breaking out in pimples, and not that you're a worthless person if you have pimples, but I mean, some things just learn to say no.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there are certain foods that it's a relationship. Sometimes you get these little temporary trial separations, and you go back and have some of that occasionally. Mm-hmm. Some foods you got to get a divorce from. Yeah. A lot of folks I see, they're in an abusive relationship with food. They're just being beaten to death, by Twinkies,
or even rice cakes. I mean, I'll tell you, I can't handle a rice cake. That's 3 days it takes me to recover from a single rice cake.
Wow.
Yeah. And I again, that's why Mark Sisson is kind of like my boy, because when he talks about his inability to have grains, I'm like, man, I just resonate with you. Like, I cannot do it.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I think
it's a no-brainer. Yeah. That was my divorce from grains. It's finally gone. And I was so happy that I began to, after a while, be able to tolerate fruit again, which is, okay. Yeah, I was able to tolerate fruit again after the keto diet, and now that I'm doing this more paleo thing. And it's working out really well, like truly is. I mean, do I wish I would have had a little bit more energy, but I might be switching back, metabolisms from kind of trying to have pasta here and there, or gluten-free pizzas once in a while, but it wasn't doing me any good.
Because if you look at the classic food pyramid, mm-hmm. Which had the largest part of it was the grains and flour and all of this, and the fats and those sorts of things were the tiniest part of it. This food pyramid wasn't designed by a bunch of wonderful nutritionists. It was designed by a bunch of lawyers for the FDA. And that's why they subsidize the producers, a lot of the fast foods, the people who grow the corn and the soy and the wheat, they subsidize them. So they want people to buy a lot of those foods. That food pyramid, it has nothing to do with health. In fact, turn the food pyramid on its head, and you'll be closer to having a healthier routine.
That's what Nurse Jen, that's what my wife says, Jen. Oh, that's her line. Flip it upside down.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It really is true. But I really feel for people who are in a position where they just truly don't know what to do. Because I was there once upon a time. All I knew is I ate a lot. I mean, I could just eat. I mean, it was like it was an old commercial for an antacid. They show these big, heavy guys over eating. They call them, these are the guys who eat for a living. And it was like it was one of those.
Yeah.
It just feels wonderful to be able to just say no. Again, your taste buds in your hands, you're their master, not their servant. You decide what you reach for, willpower and want power, and it kind of builds on itself. Because when you start getting those results, all of a sudden, wow, these pants are too tight. Now they're getting too loose. I like my energy. I like the compliments I'm getting from my friends. I like the fact that my digestive system doesn't talk to me all day long. Mm-hmm. Then it builds on itself, but you got to give it a chance. And you got to be nurturing to yourself, both from a food choice, but mentally. You got to encourage yourself. You got to look for a good support structure. Because most folks who are overweight have friends who are overweight.
Yeah.
And when you go out to eat with them, to try to make the correct choices. It's like almost like trying to defy gravity.
Yeah. It's really unbelievable. It's like if you don't have the support system, you really have to rise above, and not in some snooty way like I'm better than you,
right.
but you definitely have to, that decision has to be made. You have to draw the line in the sand. If you don't have the support system, you've got to say, hey, look, this is my lifestyle. This is what I'm going to do. You all make fun of me, if I bring my little scoop of coconut oil with me to the restaurant, or if I, I'm the guy at the house who's not going to partake in the dessert tray or whatever. It's, you have to be really strong about it and not feel like you're being beaten down about it.
Well, and kind of the way I see it, someday I'm going to have to die my own death. Nobody can do it for me. So I'm going to live my own life.
Heck yeah.
That's what I'm going to do. And so I like to go out occasionally, but it's very rarely. Like my brother lives in Florida. I've got 2 nephews who live here 2 or 3 times a year. He comes into town. He loves a particular Mexican restaurant. So I'll go along with him. I will thoroughly enjoy it. Have that big meal. 2 days later, you're hungry again, But I'm not going to say, I have organic carrots here, I'll eat it and I'll enjoy it, but it's so infrequent.
Mm-hmm.
Oops. But I'm just going to.
Yeah,
it was. But say, live your life, make the right choices, and maybe you'll inspire somebody else to do it too.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you, because we're getting close to about 2 hours of content, which is going to be, we're almost at 2 hours.
Wow.
What I want to do is ask a couple of things that I know I just have to ask that's on the list, why you're our featured guest. So the first one is, if somebody was going to get a probiotic and they needed a good recommendation, if they really wanted to repopulate their gut, what is Mark Preisman's recommendation for that probiotic?
Okay. What I would recommend, avoiding the ones that say we have the most species. Mm-hmm. Ours has 25 or 30 or 50 species of probiotics. The reason being, most probiotics, once they drop down into your stomach, they're destroyed by the hydrochloric acid in your stomach. Very few of them survive. So if you're going to get a probiotic, make sure you get one that has what is called an enteric coating. That is, the capsule or tablet dissolves after it leaves your stomach. Okay. The problem is when you're putting these bacteria, good bacteria, hopefully into your stomach, the chances that they're going to be at all similar to what you already have there is remote. Let's say you have a house pet, a house cat, or a dog that you only let it outside do its business, and you release it into a jungle. Well, it's not going to be welcomed with milk and cookies. It's going to be destroyed very, very quickly. And that's the same thing that happens with most of the probiotics. Very few of them survive. What I would recommend, and I'm starting to see some of these, what's called a spore.
I see connection. Yep. Well, when we talked about that too, Blink, The Tipping Point, and Biology of Life by Lipton.
Yep.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay, all right, go ahead.
That's I would recommend a spore probiotic. Mm-hmm. And I can't remember the specific brands right over my head, mm-hmm. but I think Dr. Collin makes one. You can also find them in a powder form. What these are basically, they are remnants of ancient jungles and rainforests from about 50 to 60 million years ago. They are what they call carbon-based redox molecules. And what they do, they set up housekeeping in your intestine. And they're very friendly and they survive very well. And if they've been around for 50 or 60 million years, they'll probably survive a trip down your gullet. So that's what I would recommend. Again, there's several different species. I'm trying to recall one of them in particular. There's a mouthful I can't recall right offhand.
Okay.
But get a spore probiotic. Get some people, especially if they have what we call SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Many of these folks, when they take probiotics, or they take fermented foods, they produce enough gas to fill the Goodyear blimp. I mean, they just feel miserable because they have a very disrupted, what they call gut dysbiosis, just a terrible imbalance. So for them, they really kind of have to avoid those sort of things temporarily until they get some healing in the lining of the gut.
Yep.
And what I would strongly recommend for those who are interested in this whole glyphosate, zonula, occludens, gut barriers, there's an MD, a triple board certified MD named Dr. Zach Bush. Go to YouTube and look at some of his videos. He produces a product. It has essentially no flavor to it. It's a liquid that used to be called Restore. Now it's called I can't recall, he's got a new name to it. But what it does, it helps restore these the gut barrier.
And if I had to guess, I would imagine it's got some L-glutamine and quercetin in it.
Well, no, he doesn't. One can take those separately.
Okay.
Yeah, but his product doesn't have. It's actually called Ion Biome.
Really?
That's the name of it.
Okay.
And one can certainly use those supplements along with it.
Okay.
But this has, one can't complain about the flavor. It's just slightly tangy.
Okay.
And it just dissolves. I take a tablespoon every day because I don't have gut problems, but I have no desire to have them.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a way to really help heal that gut.
Preventative medicine.
That's exactly right. That's the best form.
And okay, all right. There was one more.
Okay.
So when I first met you, I was asking about taurine, the amino acid taurine.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm drawn to this and why I tell people that might have a little bit more chronic pain, and maybe not even so much joint pain, but certainly like when it comes to muscle, I recommend they take magnesium taurate. And that came to me because of my own research following, again, why am I so fatigued, like muscularly, like my back taxed, my hips taxed after going for seemingly easy runs. And other than the fact that, who knows, maybe I was overdoing it. But then I look back at Rocco Baldelli, the baseball player's career, and they ended up diagnosing him, whether it was appropriate or not, mitochondrial channelopathy.
Oh.
And it looks like there is a taurine, like people are not absorbing taurine in these potential mitochondrial disorders. So I looked at that as filling in a gap. Placebo or nay, I certainly felt better when I would megadose on magnesium taurate. And I was wondering your take on this.
Well, when you look at, first when you talk about magnesium taurate, just look at magnesium in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's involved in more than 325 known functions in the body, and it probably goes far beyond that. But when you bind it with taurine, it really enhances the magnesium, and the magnesium enhances the taurine. Taurine, again, is one of these so-called sulfur-containing amino acids, and it works very effectively as what we call an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It has actually an anti-seizure effect. It's been used for cardiac arrhythmias, but it's a sulfur-containing amino acid. And it's kind of tricky getting it in the diet. I think they call it taurine because it was originally discovered in bulls, as in Taurus. But heart rhythm has a dilating effect, as I understand it, on the coronary vasculature, peripheral blood flow. So it's very inexpensive.
Yep.
In fact, I actually get it in a powder form, the straight taurine, but then I take the magnesium taurate as well. But there's another form of magnesium that I take. It's called magnesium L-threonate. MIT took about 10 years to develop it. It actually penetrates very effectively the blood-brain barrier, and it improves what's called synaptic density. It is the ability of your brain cells to talk to each other. And interestingly, even though it helps with memory, it's been used for post-traumatic stress disorder, which kind of sounds paradoxical. You'd think something that improves memory would allow you to remember the garbage more easily, but it prevents this, what they call intrusive recollection. So very, very important stuff. But you're not going to hear about this from your doctor, not because he's an evil man and withholding information. This just doesn't cross his desk. It's not in his inbox. It's not something he hears about.
Yeah. And it really is. It's you have to be a student for the rest of your life, and that's one of the reasons that I think we get along so well. Is we hold maybe not each other, right, but ourselves, of course, accountable for continuing to read and study information and figure out why and how to affect these greater mechanisms in the body and these physiological interactions. Because it's so easy to sit in an office, and again, I'm not calling anyone out, but even, for my peers, I mean, we could sit in an office and just adjust and throw some iodine at a thyroid and some vitamin D for some immunity, and we could just say, eat a better diet, and kind of get out the door. But I don't want to do that, and clearly you haven't done that, and that is why I'm just beyond excited that we had this conversation. And I'll tell you, and even though we're going to close it out here just because, again, we're right at 2 hours and we didn't even get to the Senolytics.
Coming soon to your neighborhood.
Coming soon to a podcast near you.
Yeah, that's right.
And I wanted to get into the tandem effect of curcumin. I almost said cumin. Curcumin and
cancel.
Vitamin D. I was going to get into even more things when it came to resveratrol, and there's more stuff that we could definitely touch on.
There's a world of it, and hopefully folks have a way to ask questions, and we'll address some of the questions in future podcasts.
Yes, and I definitely want to make this a pretty consistent thing with you, Mark.
Oh, my pleasure.
Hopefully at least once every 2 months in the mix, because I think that you just bring so much to the table.
I appreciate that.
And really the education I just got, and we all got here today for 2 hours, amazing. Is there any closing thoughts, any remarks? What do we have to say? What do we got to leave the people with?
I want to say just one thing about our shared passion for this topic. Mm-hmm. I love learning it and benefiting myself, but my real pleasure is when I tell people, receptive people about this, and they try it and they come back to me, that worked. Or my mother's feeling better, or my kid all of a sudden has a nicer mood. Mm-hmm. The joy for me is in sharing it. I'm reminded of the old novel by George Eliot called Silas Marner, where Silas Marner he's a miser. He saves these gold coins. He just loves them. He's so greedy. I think at the end of the novel, he shares them with somebody else, and they benefit. To me, these gold coins, these pieces of knowledge and information, to just use this for my own selfish, narcissistic purposes. Well, I guess I'd be a healthy narcissist, but I just love seeing it when people respond to it. It's so satisfying. Mm-hmm. It's not so much that it's the ego. It's just I feel like I'm serving a purpose.
One of my big themes is truth and love and paying it forward. I mean, that is so fulfilling. That's how we sleep at night.
Yeah, some of the most valuable stuff in the world sounds cornball. Well, I don't like corn, but it's really true. Yeah. Health is wealth, and that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, I don't think health is wealth, and I don't think we could top that. And here we are closing at 2 hours. Guys, I don't even know if I'm going to edit this down more than like 2 minutes of me stumbling on a word.
A lot of meat in it.
So, as I always say, it's outro music. And until next time, it's been an absolute pleasure. And Mark, what an
Thank you.
Wonderful
absolute pleasure.
We're going to do this again for sure.
I look forward to it.
All right.
All right.